understand all of this. And we invite your presence here. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Joan Claude, and I'm the chair of the Libraries and Cultural Affairs Committee at Community Board 12 in the Bronx. Well, February 6th, February is a very interesting month, a very long month, a very short month. It's a very short month, but a month that is very busy. So many activities. Every month has special days to celebrate, and in February, there are many. In February, we have Lincoln's birthday, we have Washington's birthday, we have Singles Awareness Day, Valentine's Day, Fat Tuesday. The whole month is dedicated to Black history. And also American Heart Month is celebrated during this month. And we have many birthdays. So we might have people among us who have birthdays this month, and we would like to wish you happy birthday. Today, we will concentrate mostly on Black History Month, which is a long month, as I said before, and we'll also do American Heart Month. We are fortunate today to have two individuals from Montefiore Medical Center who will be able to talk to us about health education. Hypertension, I understand, is one of the issues or the concerns that will be addressed here. And we have Miss Nerida Franco, who's a health educator, I think, at Montefiore, and she will speak on hypertension. Miss Franco, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. Would you please introduce yourself, and then you can go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I am Nerida Franco. I am a health educator for the Montefiore Medical System. As a health educator, I work in providing the patient population, both individual in group setting as well as community, education on an array of different health related subjects. Part of what I do is educate the patient so that they're able to manage their condition and live as healthy as possible with whatever that health concern may be. And so today I got invited. Thank you for the privilege to speak with you all on what we are observing and celebrating in the nation and in the system, which is heart health. So February is when we celebrate heart health, and we do know as that our communities are particularly affected by issues related to the heart, blood pressure, different forms of heart disease, among other things. And so today, I'm not sure if I have the ability to share. I will be speaking to you on hypertension as part of that observance. Can someone clarify for me how much time I have for this? Number one. And two, if I can share my screen or not, if I need somebody to manage this for me.
Okay, I would say 15, 20 minutes. If you can do your presentation within that time frame, that would be appreciated. If you need to be a little longer, it, yeah, it also
Okay.
will be accepted. Okay.
So
Sharing. Okay.
I would attempt 15 minutes. I think is doable. Can you guys see
Okay.
my
Thank you.
screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I am going to put this on presentation mode. Okay. So, heart health. The focus is going to be hypertension. If you have any question, or I can't see you, so if you raise your hands up with the icons. I'm not able to see them on this end, so just feel free to interject. Um, and
Excuse
this
me, but I would like the presentation to go on and then the question and answers at the end of the presentation.
excellent. So that'll take even less time. Okay,
Please hold your questions. I'm sorry. Okay.
no problem. All right, so today the hope is to cover what is hypertension, prevalence of hypertension. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance for keeping your blood pressure under control. What are some risk factors? What constitute a heart healthy diet, and some general recommendation for hypertension management. So hypertension is basically when your blood pressure, um, which is the force that the blood exerts over the walls of your artery, is high most of the time. So if that pressure is constantly high against your blood vessel, that is what we call hypertension. So if you look at the image on the right there, what it's showing you is an artery, showing you a blood vessel. So hypertension is literally the push or the force that this artery will sustain as the blood rushes through it. If you think of it, I like to use this example with my patients. If you think of a garden hose, right? If you see the picture on the right, this is what healthy blood pressure would represent. There is an easy flow of water without excess force, right? Someone with hypertension, if you think of the other image, right, you see there's someone holding the hose and applying, kind of closing the diameter of the whole hose, not allowing the water flow to be as smooth as it is on the left. So that would be the equivalent to someone with hypertension. If you had normal blood pressure, your blood pressure will look more like the water that's on the left side picture. And then if you have hypertension, it will look more like the picture on the right. That is what hypertension is, when you have too much force being exerted against the walls of your arteries in order for the blood to travel through. There was a recent update as to what hypertension is and how it's diagnosed and all of that. So, from this last update from the American Heart Association, we can see that the numbers have been lowered a bit, right? So, what that comes from understanding that even with mild sustained elevated blood pressure sustained over time, people can face health consequences. In the past, you had higher levels. Right now, with a lower reading, we can catch a greater number of people that have maintained what in the past would have been considered normal blood pressure, 130, now are considered elevated blood pressure. So in the past, we had 130 over 80 or more. Now it's 120 for a normal blood pressure. So when you read your blood pressure, your reading comes in two number. You have a top number that's called the systolic blood pressure. That is the pressure exerted when the heart beats. So as the heart sends the blood out, right? That is your systolic blood pressure. The diastolic blood pressure represents the number in the bottom. So that would be the 80 in the case of 120 over 80, right? So the 80 represent the pressure that the heart is sustaining, that the blood is producing as the heart rests. So you know the heart has those two beats, right? So one comes from blood, the heart receiving blood, and the other one, the heart is sending the blood out. So your systolic blood pressure is that when your heart, on a heartbeat, when the blood is being sent out, and then your diastolic is your resting, right? When the heart is actually receiving the blood. And so for a normal blood pressure, you want to have less than 100. And for your diastolic blood pressure, you want to have 80 or less. If you have between 120 to 129 for your systolic blood pressure and 80 or less for your diastolic blood pressure, under the new guidelines, you have elevated blood pressure. If you have a blood pressure of 130, which in the past was when what was considered elevated blood pressure, if you have 130 to 139 over 80 to 189 for the diastolic blood pressure, you have high blood pressure, or what's called hypertension stage 1. Stage 2 hypertension is 140 or higher over 90 or higher. A hypertensive crisis is anything higher than 180 or higher than 120 for the diastolic blood pressure. So what is the prevalence like? In 2015, and these were studies run by the American Heart Association and the College of Cardiology, American Society of Hypertension, it was determined that an estimate 65 million adults in America, which is about a quarter of the population, had hypertension. When that same data is looked at, which is the most recent now, in 2019, that number had jumped significantly to where now we have half of the adult population in the United States, about 47% of it, or 160 million adults, who have hypertension, right? Out of those, about 34 million are in need of medication to manage their blood pressure. If we look at the map on the screen, you would see that blood pressure distribution throughout the country varies. So we have different rates in different regions of the country. High blood pressure is more common in some areas than other. In the map, for example, you would see that for our southeast part of the nation, there's a much higher concentration of individual with blood pressure than you have in the center and northwest part of the country. How absolute or concrete is this data? Well, to a certain degree, you can assume that it doesn't really reflect the true effect of hypertension, and that is because this is self-reported data, right? And we do know that about 1 in 5 people who are hypertensive are unaware that they have it. So you can be looking at a much higher number of people being hypertensive than what the data is actually depicting. So these are individuals who are aware of their status. But we do know that 1 out of every 5 person with hypertension doesn't know that they're hypertensive. Okay. Now, why is it important? Why are those numbers important, or that information important? If you think of the fact that hypertension, for many reasons, is called a silent killer, not knowing that you have hypertension can really increase your risk for suffering consequences related to it. So you have sustained high blood pressure for a number of years that can definitely lead for serious health consequences. You're looking at strokes, you're looking at vision loss, you're looking at potential heart failure, you're looking at high risk for heart attack, kidney disease, and kidney failure. You're looking at sexual dysfunction for both male and female, to name a few, right? So these are some of the more common issues that people face as a result of having uncontrolled blood pressure that very often they are unaware of. Okay. So what are the risk factors associated with hypertension? For one, family history. We do know that there is a genetic component to it. It tends to be related to our genetic for some people. Increased age is a risk factor. race, we do know that the older you are, the more likely you are to have high blood pressure. We do know also that it's an issue that develops over time, so it can be considered part of normal process of aging. So it's more commonly seen in older adults. We do know that for African Americans, for example, talking about race and ethnicity, African Americans tend to develop high blood pressure more often than people of other races. It has to do, again, with genetic, and in part, there's a big issues with how African Americans, how we tend to be far more sensitive to sodium and other things, stressors, environmental stress also plays a big role, but they definitely tend to have high blood pressure more frequently than non-African Americans. When it comes to gender, we do know that men, especially men until the age of 64, have a higher likelihood of being hypertensive than women. For women, the risk goes up a year later. So by 65 and older, women are likely also to get high blood pressure, to develop high blood pressure. So what are some modifiable risks? So what we were talking about were definitely things that we can't change. We can't modify those things. You're not able to change your age. You're not able to change your ethnicity or family background. But we can definitely do certain things that are more related to behaviors, right? So physical inactivity or low fitness level is a risk factor for hypertension. Following an unhealthy diet, particularly if that diet is high in sodium or saturated fats, following a lifestyle that is sedentary where obesity is sustained for, in some cases, life, or overweight or obesity are present. That's a higher risk. Having poor managed diabetes or diabetes mellitus is definitely a risk factor for hypertension that one can control. High cholesterol level, also, we do know that when cholesterol builds up inside the walls of our artery, or plaque formation leads not only to conditions like atherosclerosis, but high cholesterol and its own, if plaque is formed on your arteries, increases your risk for having a cardiovascular event like a heart attack, and definitely increase your blood pressure because it causes narrowing of your blood vessels. Smoking is another big risk factor that is controllable or manageable. Again, salt consumption for some of us is an issue. So those are among the things that we can definitely address and control because they are behavior related. We have those that drink too much alcohol too often have a higher risk for maintaining high blood pressure. Sleep apnea is not to cause blood pressure to stay high or for people to develop it. And then there are psychological stresses, not being secure in your physical space, feeling insecurity about your job, for example, your personal safety. Any degree of stress will definitely cause a reaction on your body that would lead to high blood pressure. Smoking and tobacco use are another controllable risk factor for hypertension. So in the United States right now, nearly half of the US population, as I mentioned before, that's about 160 million people, are hypertensive. Of those, half are men, 44% are women, and 1 in 4 of those hypertensive are controlled, right? Those are people who see their doctor, take their medication perhaps, and are able to keep normal blood pressure in spite of their diagnosis. About half, 45% of that group is uncontrolled, right? We're talking about 34 million people for whom medication is recommended. 56% of that population are African Americans, or 56% of the African Americans have hypertension. 48% for the white population, Asians 46, and Hispanics with about 39%. Salt in the diet is one of the big culprit. We do know that the standard diet recommended for hypertension management, called DASH, alludes to the fact that salt is one of the things that we really have to pay attention to and work at limiting. The general recommendation is that we eat less than 200, less than 2,000 300 micrograms of sodium per day, right? We do know that the average person sometimes eats as much as twice or three times that amount. Now, where we get most of our salt is not necessarily what you put in the food when you're doing the cooking yourself, but rather what comes already in some of the items that we buy. And the fact that we don't eat any individual item just by itself. For example, if you are to have a sandwich, that takes, think about the salt in the bread by itself, the salt that's going to be part of your cold cuts, the salt that's in the mayo or the mustard that you're putting in that sandwich, the salt that you would probably add as you put together your tomatoes and your lettuce and things like that. So it's the combination of all of those items that sometimes we forget to take into account, right? So by the time you finish building your sandwich, you may have far more sodium than you wish to have. Then you have foods that are naturally high in sodium. You have here the salty six, right? So you have pizza, soup, especially those that come in cans and boxes. I'm amazed to see people who know that they are hypertensive say that they love those cup of noodles, right? One of those cup of noodles has basically, in some cases, all of the salt that they should be having in one day, right? And these are things that people do as a snack while they're waiting for the meal. You know, I was hungry, I came in, so I just made a cup of soup while the meal was being prepared, right? So just that one snack gave you almost all of the salt that you should have consumed for that one day. And then you have poultry and other uh, meats that also are prepared high in sodium, especially the fried foods. So here's what one day of healthy eating can look like. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the DASH diet, but the general recommendation for the DASH diet is that you eat foods that are high in calcium, potassium, and magnesium. Together from the foods that we eat, those minerals help our body better self regulate blood pressure. So in this particular example, you have for a breakfast Greek yogurt with some granola and fruit. So you have fiber from the fruit and the granola. You have the yogurt, which would give you calcium, right? You have for a snack, you have a sandwich, or in this case, half of a sandwich, right? That's a salmon. You can assume it looks like it would be something that comes from a can, right? Hopefully, that would be something that you would have looked at and determine it's low sodium as opposed to regular one, right? And then for a snack, you have dried nuts. If you notice, they are unsalted and they are not um, toasted or roasted, right? Then you have a home cooked meal. This is chicken, asparagus, and potato. Potato, you're getting potassium, you're getting magnesium, you're getting fiber, and again, some more of those minerals from the asparagus, right? Then you have your apple and celery for another snack. High protein coming from and healthy fats coming from your peanut butter, right? And you have the celeries and the apple, again, providing fiber. The celery is known to help a lot with blood pressure because of all the content in minerals that it possesses. So, looking at foods that would give you one or as many of those three main um, nutrients or minerals is important. So you have to be really intentional when you are hypertensive as to what you put in your plate. The food can do one or two things. It can help heal you, or it can make you sick. And so um, you can find things that, if you do in moderation, even if they're not considered to be a great choice, they won't pose that much of a risk. But then you have others that can be really detrimental, and we tend to often have them more frequent than we should. So your canned foods, your pre-made meals tend to be very high, like those TV dinners. If you look at boxes and canned soup, they tend to be really high in sodium. And so those items, as often as possible, should be avoided. Another recommendation is that we get physical activity regularly. We do know that when you exercise, exercise helps your body release stress, helps you with controlling weight, but it has a direct relationship with blood pressure. Initially, as you're moving and doing things, your blood pressure goes up because you are moving, right? You're in action. But when you go back to a rested state, your blood vessels, because of exercise, become more elastic. And elasticity is something that is really necessary to protect you against things like a stroke, a heart attack, right? Because if your blood pressure shoots up really high and your blood vessels are rigid and unable to expand, then you have a higher risk that that blood vessel would burst, right? But if you exercise regularly, you tend to have kind of more elastic blood vessels, which allows you to sustain blood pressure easier than if you didn't. So what you're looking at are different modalities for exercise. You can use tools around the house. You can go to the gym or work out at home. Walking is free, and you can do it in the house or outside, right? If you budget permits, a gym is ideal because you have focus and dedicated time. You have machine that allows you to exercise specific part of your bodies. But if all fails, a chair can be quite a gym, right? It's a matter of um, being creative with your movement and utilizing your TV watching time to not be idle time. That can be, the 45 minutes watching whatever show could be when you put a workout. I mean, you grab a can of bean in one hand and one in the other hand, and you can do a lot, right? In those 45 minutes while you're watching the show. So movement is important. The recommendation is that you do at least 30 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week of cardiovascular exercise. How am I doing with time? Um, so, one other really important recommendation by the American Heart Association is that we monitor blood pressure regularly. It's something that I find in practice a lot of people don't do, and they do when they feel symptomatic, right? The problem with that is we learned in the beginning that hypertension is called a silent killer precisely because it shows no symptoms for most people until the person is in what's called a hypertensive crisis. So if you're waiting to have the headache or the pulsation on your neck or the pain behind your eyes and to check your blood pressure or take your medication is a really dangerous game to play, right? You can be in a crisis and not be aware. And if that is not addressed, you can have a cardiovascular event. You can have a heart attack. You can have a stroke, right? The way for you to know where your blood pressure is checking. So if you don't check your blood pressure, there'll be no way for you to determine whether your blood pressure is high or not. Okay, so really risky to not monitor your blood pressure. Home monitoring is what you do. You want to make sure that you do that twice a day if you have been prescribed a monitoring kit. And there are very specific instructions and really good videos that you can look up to see how to do it effectively. I've seen people demonstrate blood pressure reading to me, and no wonder, right? The person is speaking, the person is not seated properly, or they're doing things while monitoring their blood pressure, and that would yield not a so reliable number. So making sure that you're following instructions as to how you should measure your blood pressure is important so that you get real numbers or number closer to what they should be. That is not to say that because you know what it is at home, that becomes a substitute to your doctor visit. You should definitely go to your doctor and go to your follow up and have those regular consultation. It is ideal for you to show up to your doctor's office with your blood pressure record. There is such thing as white coat syndrome, where people tend to get anxious when they are in a medical setting, and so their blood pressure tends to read higher when they're in the clinics than it is when they are at home. So if at home you're maintaining good blood pressure, but every time you show up to the doctor's office is higher, and you have that record to prove that you have good management at home, then the doctor perhaps may not suggest that, upping your medication or putting you on one more medication. They will understand that that probably is the result of white coat syndrome. So in many ways, having that information helps you demonstrate good management when the reading in the clinic are not necessarily matching with what you're saying. One other recommendation is that if your blood pressure is higher than 100, 180 over 120, you should head to the hospital, call your doctor, especially if you're experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath, if you have back pain, numbness, weakness, anything that would resemble symptoms of a stroke, right? Changing your vision, difficulty speaking, difficulty swallowing. And if you see that your blood pressure doesn't come down after you check it twice, you should definitely call 911. That is a hypertensive crisis, and you need to be helped in lowering that blood pressure in a secure space where things can be uh, avoided or prevented. So, concluding, hypertension is a condition in which, again, the blood pressure in your blood vessels is higher than it should be. Considered normal is a blood pressure of 120 or less over 80 or less. Hypertension is anything 140 or higher over 90 or higher. So if you have high blood pressure, you've been diagnosed, you've been told that you have high blood pressure, it is important that you make lifestyle changes that would support a healthier blood pressure. Nutrition, where you focus on something like the DASH diet or the Mediterranean diet, which suggests that you eat more food higher in calcium, potassium, and magnesium, reducing sodium. It's important that you do physical activity at least 30 minutes, 4 to 5 days a week, to maintain more elasticity on your blood vessels and lose some weight. If you are obese or overweight, it is important to work on getting to a healthier weight. The bigger your body is, the more your heart has to work to pump blood around it all the time. It's important that you take your medication. Different medication work differently because hypertension in one case may be caused by a condition that's what's called secondary hypertension. So not it's not necessarily the result of normal aging in some cases, or obesity and smoking and things like behavior related. It can be the result of a different health condition. So in that case, you want to make sure that you follow suit with what your medication regimen is in taking it. Tobacco use, we know, is a real big problem for people with hypertension. It will cause you to have high blood pressure. And if you have it, it would definitely affect it negatively. It will cause you to maintain higher than normal blood pressure, causing your veins to harden, which increases your risk for heart attack and stroke. And that's it, folks. Questions per moi.
Franco, thank you very much for this presentation. It's very informative, and I think we've learned a lot by listening and watching this presentation. Folks, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask your questions. My first question is, what is the difference between the DASH and the Mediterranean diet?
Okay. So DASH was designed for treating hypertension, right? Mediterranean diet, not necessarily. However, the focus in both is the use of more fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy fats. So if you looked at the recommendation for DASH, it looks very similar to how the Mediterranean diet looks. So there is recommendation that you have for protein more lean meats, that you have more of your fatty fish as opposed to the steak and the pork and the sausages and those kinds of proteins, right? So it's a cleaner, more natural, if you want to call it, style of eating, the Mediterranean. And then the DASH diet is very specific, very intentional as to the kind of foods that you want to have, because the idea is that you get those three elements, those three minerals primarily through the foods that you eat. So calcium, potassium, and magnesium.
I guess the saying is true, we are what we eat.
Pretty much so.
Folks, do you have any questions?
Somebody put up a hand. I'm not sure who, because I can't. Let me see if I can get
I
this.
think someone has something in the chat.
If someone can read it for me, because let me see if I can.
Yes, a great presentation. What are the symptoms of hypertension? Are there any food that one can use to control hypertension?
Oh, those are great questions. So majority of people won't have symptoms until their blood pressure is really high. Those symptoms sometimes include a headache, right? Like center of your head kind of headache. It could be pain in the back of your neck, like people call it tension headaches. You can have uh, pain, or for some people, blurred vision, pain behind your eyes. Those are symptoms that you have hypertension. But again, by the time you get those symptoms, your blood pressure has been very high for quite some time. The question about foods. So we know that we definitely want to avoid things that are high in salt. There are certain vegetables that help with your blood pressure, things like beets, having celery. It's known to help with blood pressure. We do know that when you do eat your dark green leafy vegetables, best bet for blood pressure management. And if you eat foods that would help with regulating other things like your blood cholesterol level, like is this the case of your omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids that you get from things like salmon, tuna, you get those from flax seeds and chia and those kinds of fatty grains. Those are elements that also help you in keeping healthier heart, healthier blood pressure.
So much. Someone says, how about garlic?
Garlic also, and so is grapefruit. They known to naturally lower blood pressure. Passion fruit do the same thing. However, when you are, this confuses a lot of people. When you are taking medication for blood pressure, you're going to get a warning not to eat those foods, not to have, for example, grapefruits when you take your blood pressure medication. That is because when you consume grapefruit, the pathway that the body uses to metabolize that food is the same that the body uses to metabolize the medication. And guess which one the body prefers? grapefruit, right? So the level of medication may be sustained much higher than it needs to be when if you do the two things. So you're not going to absorb the medication as well if you have it too close to the time you have your grapefruit. But grapefruit on its own, it's known to lower blood pressure. So if you're told you have you're borderline hypertensive and the doctor says you need to modify your diet, then by all means, season your food with plenty of garlic. Make sure that you eat your grapefruit and stuff like that. You're not taking medication to manage it. So you can take things in nature that would help you keep it lower. You can eat passion fruit, for example. You can have your grapefruit. You can make sure that you cook with garlic. Now, I don't advise anyone who has issue with the stomach, acidity and things like that to consume raw garlic. Like a lot of people swallow a clove of garlic. Garlic is highly acidic and would, upset your stomach even more. Any other question?
Nereida, can you start sharing in order to have a better view of everyone?
Stop sharing? Am I
Yeah.
sharing? Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
Okay. Now it's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Narita. Hi, everyone. This is Jade. I'm sorry I'm calling in. I
Jade.
just wanted to say thank you to Narita and Carlos for joining today. I was working with Joan to have someone join. I'm on the community affairs team at Montefiore, and I work with Carl Lonzano, a good friend of Joan's, on the community advisory board. So I'm really excited to join you guys tonight, Narita. I joined a few minutes late, but I heard your entire presentation, and it was so informative. I learned so much myself that I can start to do now in this age to really take care of my body as I get older. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. You're so knowledgeable. Thank you. So I just want to say thanks. And hi, Carl.
Thank you so much, Montefiore team. Much appreciated. Yes, as you said, it's a lot of information. So from now on, we should all be healthy if we follow all the examples here. Thank you
At
so
least,
much for this presentation.
my pleasure. At least begin to identify those areas that you can improve, and it's about making one change at a time. If sodium is an issue for you, inactivity is an issue for you, then definitely those things are worth addressing. We do know that one heavy ticket is maintaining healthy weight. So it all starts, like they say, with the diet. So healthy diet help you keep healthy weight, help you control those conditions. So I wish you guys the very best. We're here if you have any question. I know you know how to contact Carlos, and we can address it that way. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now we'll move on to our Black History Month celebration. And we have members of the committee who have researched and will speak about their favorite or the person that they want to recognize during the session. And I will just start off with the person who started the Black History Month celebration, which most of us know, or all of us know, is Carter G. Woodson, who is also known as the father of Black history. Mr. Woodson, whose parents were enslaved, was an author, historian, and the second African American to earn a PhD at Harvard University. He recognized that the American education system offered very little information about the accomplishments of African Americans and founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, now called the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. In 1926, Woodson proposed February be named Black History Month, which encompasses the birthdays of two great Americans who played a prominent role in shaping Black history, Black American history, namely Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. whose birthdays fall on February 14th and February 12th, respectively. So February is Black History Month, federally recognized celebration of the contributions African Americans have made to this country and a time to reflect on the continued struggle for racial justice. Black History Month has become one of the most celebrated cultural heritage months on the calendar, said LaGarrett J. King, an associate professor of social studies education at the University of Missouri. King, founding director of the Carter Center for Kindergarten through Grade 12, Black history educators, said, some educators use Black History Month to disrupt the official narrative, but many teach Black history from a white-centered perspective. Many American public schools offer only sanitized versions of slavery and the civil rights movement, along with biographies of a handful of figures who are palatable to white audiences. Some offer inaccurate or inappropriate lessons such as slavery reenactments. Florida's Department of Education has rejected an AP course covering African American studies, saying the class indoctrinates students to a political agenda. The Governor DeSantis's press secretary say the course is a vehicle for a political agenda and leaves large, ambiguous gaps that can be filled with additional ideological material, which they will not allow. And we know that this will continue. Stay tuned. This is not right. So we will hear more about this, them not allowing these subjects to be taught in high school. Members of the committee, if whatever you have researched, would you like to present that now? Ms. Campbell, I'm looking at you. Ms. Sadie Campbell?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we
Okay.
can.
Okay, all right. So this evening, I'm a little distressed at this point because I've done some
Okay.
research. Well, for Black history, you know, it's
Mhm.
not just a month for me or for us. Every day is Black history for
Yes.
me, and it should be for us. And Black history, as we know, is American history. And the distressing thing for me is that as much as we have given or contributed as Black folks, we have watered the soil of America, but still we're still being trampled. So this evening I'm somewhat distressed, and I have decided not to speak on the issue. So tonight you have to forgive me because I'm kind of a little disturbed right now regarding Black history. I guess I watch too much or read too much of the of what's going on, and the Carrie Nichols murder, that is really is playing on my mind. And even though I try to let go of it, when I see that some of the policemen who killed, murdered Tyree, that they were Black, I can see where the system has so much, have done so much to us as folks that we even hate ourselves. So I'm today, you know, I'm very, very upset. So I don't want to say anything else because there are some things that's coming in my mind that are not very pleasant. So I will just wish you all a very happy, whomever is enjoying or celebrating Black History Month. just remember that we are Black all year long. Thank you. You can all continue. I'm sure other folks, have other things to say. That's it for me tonight. I see a
So,
hand. I don't know whose hand that is.
Mr. King,
Thank you for your
Andy?
candidness.
Yes, it is. It's Andy King. Peace and blessings, everyone. How are y'all tonight?
welcome.
Welcome.
You have the floor.
Glad to join the cultural affairs tonight. Just want to hear what y'all were discussing and talking about. And I want to say to you, Sadie, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be annoyed. It's okay to be pissed off because Black history has been raped, manipulated, twisted, and flipped upside down to the point that it got us going after each other. And that's been the story of us since day one with Massa and the house Negro and the field Negro. So it's okay to talk about your feelings because we have this conversation around which it gets whitewashed, it gets soft, and we don't tell hard truths of what the so-called Black in America has gone through. And we hide it to make other people, make the press comfortable in the narrative of what they've created from day one. So it's okay to be upset and to be annoyed. As the executive director of the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, we held our Black History celebration, celebrating our history on February 1st at Richard Green Middle School. And one of the things that I shared with the whole audience of 500 students, we ran a film on the Civil War. And after they watched this documentary for about 20 minutes, they realized that Lincoln did not free the slaves. The whole document tells the real story of how the Black troops that were recruited that came in won the Civil War because the North was getting their butts kicked by the South, and Lincoln had to recruit black men to come into the Union to win that war. Something that's hidden in his history books and is well documented in white history books and in Black history books, but they don't tell that story because it empowers Black people to be better to themselves, to be better to each other. So feel okay when, if you're upset and disgusted, because that's the only way things is change is if we recover from yesterday. So many of us has been lied to about the story of Black in America, and now is the time. If we're gonna have a real conversation, let's have it more than just in the month of February, but move forward into March and all the way back to February again, so our children understand, communities understand, and everyone else can understand the truth. So we're gonna be better in the real solutions than trying to find solutions to a lie. So I want to thank everybody again tonight for this who's on this committee. I'm looking forward to hear more conversations. And tomorrow evening on my talk show, I have the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs for the City of New York, Laurie Combo, to talk about what the city is doing in regards to cultural affairs. So if there's any thoughts or questions that anybody wants to ask the commissioner, please tune into the show or just email KingTalkTuesdays@gmail for any questions that you might have at when she comes on at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. So thanks again and allowing for me to speak. God bless and be well, everyone.
Would you give me that address again, Mr. King? It's called King Talk.
Yes, King Talk Tuesdays with an S, King Talk Tuesdays @gmail.com. The show airs at 8 p.m. It'll be coming on live on Facebook and our YouTube channel. And you can ask questions live of her at that moment as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. God bless everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, participating. Does anyone else have anything to say? Any comments? Any concerns? No comments, no concerns, nothing to say? Well, since we have nothing to say, no concerns, I'll say thank you to all of you who took the time out of your busy schedule, busy afternoon to be with us and to hear what we have to say. We thank you so much. And I think at this time, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Do we need a second?
Carla.
Okay. This meeting has been adjourned. It's what time is it? It's 8:02 p.m. Thank you very much.
Good night.
God bless you all. Take care. Meeting has been adjourned.
All right.
Thank you so much. Everybody be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again, Mr. Hayder. You did a wonderful job. Ms. Franco. Thanks, Carla.